All right, so you'll notice that a neck is not on the call this today. Yeah, it's kind of weird. He was supposed to join the call yesterday. We're supposed to record this yesterday, and then something odd came up where he just wasn't able to make it. It was a weird, like, last minute excuse. And then today, I called him about an hour ago, and he said, "Give me 5 minutes." And I've been waiting on this call now for about an hour for him to join. And I'm wondering why he doesn't want to join today. And, maybe he's busy. Maybe life just got in the way. Never happened before. Not one time has he ever been too busy to do footy talk. He's always been able to do it. But I'm wondering if maybe the reason is what happened in week 12. So last week was our first week of picks, and Neck bet 1,000 fake dollars, and all that he got back was 661. He lost $330, fake dollars, of course. For me though, I bet $1,000 and I won 1,600. That's 2x the initial investment you get back. And I think that he might have just been a little bit, a little bit embarrassed, a little embarrassed by how I kind of cleaned his clock. So he just is kind of running and hiding. I think, that's my theory. Maybe he'll, come back. Maybe he'll have picks. Maybe he'll stop being a little bitch. I mean, he's a Man U fan, so I mean, they're all kind of all little bitches. But you know what? We're not going to dwell on that because I still want to do my picks today. I'm not going to do the fact that he's crying to stop us. So let's get into this. I already filled this in, so I'm just going to walk through these. So let's start off with like what I think is the most important thing to remember while gambling. Just a background on me, like I used to kind of have a gambling problem. Now I'm just doing picks for fun. Yeah, I mean, I used to like stay up until like, 2 o'clock in the morning gambling on like Indian badminton. So I don't do it anymore, but I love talking about picks. I love thinking about it, and when I'm strictly intellectual about it, I'm able to, win a lot of money, as you can see. So, what I think to remember about gambling in general is that it's not about being right, right? It's not about being right. It's about winning money. That's what it's about. That's why you gamble, because you want to win money, right? And so, you're not betting based upon what you think will happen. You're betting on what you think the value is. Or another way of thinking about it is that, for example, Brighton minus 250, that is an implied winning percentage of Brighton winning about like 75% of the time, right? So if you look at this game and you think to yourself, if this game is played, 100 times, or if this game is played 1,000 times, right? Will Brighton win 750 times, right? If the answer is exactly yes or more, then you bet on Brighton. If the answer is less than 750 times, then you bet on Tide or Southampton, right? And then the amount of money that you bet should be correlated to how, what that difference, what that gap is, and how certain you are, right? So if you're looking at this like out of 1,000 games, Brighton only wins 300, well then, you got to put the money on Southampton, right? Like that's a lot of value. And yeah, even let's not take that. Let's say like Brighton wins 600 versus 700. You still bet on Southampton, right? That's a huge gap. Um, and yeah, you'll probably lose most of the time, right? But you're going to win. But because of the odds that you get, that minority of the time that you win is going to make you more money over the long term, right? Okay. So let's get into this then. I think one of the most important things to do when looking at the EPL or in general is to kind of like take benchmark odds, right? So like look at odds that you think make sense and then apply that same paradigm to everything else, right? I think that one of the big problems, just high level with the EPL's lines right now, I've only been doing this for 2 weeks so far, is that typically there's a huge difference in football between like 12 and 20 or like 16 and 20, and a huge difference between like 2 and 7 and so on, right? Like the standings mean something, right? And like those gaps actually mean a lot, right? But if you look at the standings this year, it's really not. It's really not, right? Like there is Liverpool over here, Southampton over here, and then really most of the teams are kind of bunched together right over here, right? So if like you look at this, right? Chelsea's third. So Manchester City is second with 23 points, right? And West Hampton is 14th with 15 points, right? There is only an 8 point difference between number 15 between number 14 and number two, right? That is a very small difference, right? So what I think is happening this year right now, and this is where I think the value is coming from, is that Vegas is treating, 2 versus 14 as if it's a regular 2 versus 14 give you insane odds, when really it's a lot more condensed than it actually is. So let's look at this in practice. So Brighton versus Southampton, I think that this line makes sense. So just to like take a step back, just to in case this is the first video you're watching, we're betting 1,000 fake dollars in units of 10. The rules are that you have to place a bet on everything, right? So Brighton tie Southampton. I put 20 on tie. I don't really feel that confident about it. I think that these odds make a lot of sense. I'm not going to bet on Brighton because that's just no value whatsoever. You're gonna, when you think the odds all make sense, you should bet on like what you think will is more likely and gives you better odds. Typically a tie, right? Because like Southampton for Southampton to win, a lot of crazy stuff has to happen, probably. For a tie to happen, that's not true. Like ties happen all the time between great teams and bad teams, right? Like it's not the bad team has to win. It's just the Brighton has to drop the ball that day, right? So like 20 on a tie, that's fine, right? So let's look at Brentford versus Leicester. Okay. So Brentford versus Leicester, there are other instances of this that are much better examples, right? But like Brentford versus Leicester, like these lines are pretty similar to Brighton versus Southampton. They're not like very close. There are others that are way closer, but these lines are pretty close, right? Brentford versus Leicester. So let's look at these the standings. Brentford's 11, Leicester's 16, right? Versus Brighton is 5 and Southampton is 20, right? Or to put it another way, there's an 18-point difference between Brighton and Southampton, right? Between Brentford and Leicester, there's a 7 point difference, right? So there's about a 3x difference between Brighton and Southampton and Brentford Leicester, right? There's about 3x in terms of a point difference. When you're getting very similar odds, right? Like plus 400, plus 600, honestly, there's a gap, but like it's not that big of a gap, right? So if you look at Brighton and Southampton and you say, okay, these lines make sense, right? Like, I agree with this, right? Then you have to look at Brentford and Leicester and say there's a huge amount of value there, right? Because if Brighton makes sense, this doesn't make sense. Vice versa, if this makes sense, then you should probably bet on Brighton, right? Going down the line, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, they're kind of treating this game as a toss-up. Crystal Palace is 9, Newcastle, 19, Newcastle is 10. There's like a 10-point difference between the two. It's at Crystal Palace. So they're giving, they're giving the favorite to Newcastle. Like, I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna put 20 on Newcastle. I don't really think home field advantage actually means that much in football. Maybe it does, who knows? I think that like just like the quality of teams matters a lot more, but like I don't feel particularly confident in Newcastle. Like I guess another way to say this is that like there are teams every year that like consistently lose to worse teams than them. And Newcastle should be like number 4, but like I just they're just kind of dropping the ball this year, right? So let's look at their results. Let's see if I'm correct. Okay, yeah. So they lost. By the way, this is Portuguese. This is Brazilian ESPN, so it's in Portuguese, right? So they lost to West Ham. They lost to Chelsea. They lost to Brighton. They tied Everton. Again, this is a team that's dropping the ball. I'm not feeling very confident about them. Like I think these lines kind of make sense, and I think that Newcastle is generally just like the better team. So that's why I'm putting $20 on Newcastle, but I'm not really like loading up the bank with it. So Nottingham versus Ipswich. I think that this is crazy. This is crazy in my mind. Okay. So um for starters, Nottingham, as we've kind of talked about in for past episodes, sorry, my computer's really fucking old and it's shitting the bed. Nottingham is seventh, right? 2 weeks ago, Nottingham was third, right? So like Nottingham is a very soft seven. They should really be like 13th and 14th. Ipswich is 18th. I mean, they've had some good games. The idea that Nottingham Forest, again, this has, you know, kind of similar lines to Brentford versus Leicester, a little bit less than Brighton Southampton. The fact that, this is kind of similar this way, like I just think it's kind of ridiculous. Do I think Nottingham's gonna win? Like, yeah, I do. But like if you're giving me plus 410 for this game, like I'm gonna take that 8 days a week, right? That's just weird. Wolves versus Bournemouth. As you see, like I typically choose dogs just because EPL in general is just like, really crazy. So, especially this season. So like dogs are just good. But like in this situation, I'm taking the favorite. Bournemouth versus Wolves. Yeah, I mean, Bournemouth is 15 points, Wolves is nine. Like the way that I'm looking at this season of the EPL is that you have, I fucking hate that they're doing it that way. You have Liverpool as like a class of its own. Not to be like a Liverpool fan, but like that's just true, right? Then you have 2 through 8. This is kind of one group. Nottingham is a little bit of a pretender, so like you really should switch Aston Villa and Nottingham and just have, Aston Villa, right? Where you have City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Tottenham, Aston Villa. And I think these all teams that like can win against each other any week, can lose against each other any week, right? And then you have Nottingham Forest, Fulham down to West Ham, like this group of teams, and that is like the third tier. And then you have Everton, Leicester, Wolverhampton, Ipswich, and Crystal Palace, right? And then Southampton's the fifth tier, right? So like in this scenario, like I think that a team on the higher tier is not always, but like is typically going to beat a team on the lower tier, obviously. Like they're just like segmented that way is kind of in my mind. So if we're looking at like Wolves versus Bournemouth, right? Like Bournemouth is a tier three team. Wolves are a tier four team. So like if you're getting plus odds on Bournemouth, I would take them. Again, Wolves might have home field advantage, but I don't really care about it that much. West Ham versus Arsenal. So this is actually like kind of the crux of what I'm talking about. And I'm actually going to change this a little bit. I'm going to do 180 over here because I think that some of these odds, I think this odd, every time I look at this odds, I think it's fucking crazier. I'm going to change this to 150 and to do 210. Um, if I don't like to do picks of the week. I think we're gonna stop doing that. Because like, it's not about certainty, it's about like where I think the most value comes from. And for me, it's West Ham versus Arsenal. Like, okay, so let's just look at this, right? So these odds are pretty much the same as Brighton and Southampton, right? 550, 600 minus 250 minus 220, right? These odds are pretty much mirror images of each other, okay? So let's look at this. Brighton is fifth and Southampton is 20th. There is a 18-point difference between them. Okay. Let's look at Arsenal. Arsenal is fourth. And I really think that, like, yeah, Arsenal has a bigger names and like more famous, prestigious club. But I really think that Arsenal, Brighton, Tottenham, and Aston Villa are at the same level this year, right? Um, I mean, prove me wrong, but that's just how I see it, right? So Brighton is fifth. We have an 18-point difference, right? Arsenal is fourth, same amount of points, 22, but West Ham has 15 points, right? So again, this is a 7-point difference, and they're pricing it as the same as an 18-point difference. Right? West Ham is kind of at the worst of the tier three ladder, right? Versus somebody at the best of the middle of the tier two ladder, right? With the worst of the tier three ladder versus somebody in the middle of tier two, right? And you're getting the same price as middle of tier two ladder versus a team that I had to make its own tier because it's that bad. I mean, the value is just incredible. Do I think West Ham is going to win? Probably not. But like, you're giving me, yeah, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna do this. 180, 180. Just because I think that these are kind of similar. So yeah, like you're giving me these odds, I'm taking them 8 days a week, right? Chelsea versus Aston Villa. Um, I mean, these odds are not as egregious as West Ham versus Arsenal, obviously. These odds are more in line with like Nottingham Forest and Ipswich, like actually, right? So let's look at that as justified, okay? Chelsea has three more points than Aston Villa, okay? Nottingham Forest, even though I think Nottingham Forest is a pretender, Nottingham Forest has 10 more points than Ipswich, right? So I know that these aren't exact, this isn't an exact science, right? But like the difference between Nottingham Forest and Ipswich is three times larger than the difference between Aston Villa and Chelsea. Yet you're getting the same odds for these two games, right? Like if you think that Ipswich is underpriced, which I think it is, then Aston Villa must be insanely underpriced. Like, yeah, I know it's at Chelsea, but like, come on, this is just insanity, right? This is an insane line. These two lines in my mind are like insane. And I think that these lines like are more about the prestige than they are about the actual quality on the field, right? The reason why you're getting, you know, Arsenal minus 22 versus West Ham as the same as Brighton versus Southampton is because you have a lot of Arsenal fans and Arsenal has a storied history and stuff, while Brighton is kind of like, a new, not, I would say it's not a new team, but like it's not like a historic powerhouse, right? That's why it's getting disrespected this way, right? Um, but you just pick up the value, pick up the value, right? Like okay, let's continue on. Manchester United versus Everton. Let's look at this. So Man United, middle of tier three, kind of bottom of tier three, and Everton is at the top of tier four. So yeah, Manchester United should win. But like again, these are similar odds. Like just to point out how crazy some of these things are, right? And like I really think that like I'm gonna do 120 and 130. Like I really think that like having this as a baseline really like shows you how crazy some of these things are, right? Man United versus Everton has the same odds as Brighton versus Southampton, right? I know I'm being a dead horse here, right? But Brighton versus Southampton has an 18-point difference. Man United versus Everton is a 5-point difference, right? It's a 4 times bigger difference in points scored. And by the way, we're like a third of the way through the season, right? So we can't even say like, oh, it's the schedule so far. Like all these teams have played big teams. All like this is an accurate represent. And like I know that people like be like, oh, I have this algorithm. You have sure. Like is this how the end of the season is going to go? No, of course not. We know that some of these teams are going to fall off, like Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa is probably go for a run. Things are going to move around. This isn't exactly proof, right? But like, I care more about what people actually do on the pitch than your theories about what they do on the pitch. Because your theories are kind of, they don't really mean that much, right? Like better teams lose. You have teams all the time are like, oh, that team was great, but they couldn't put it together. Like Liverpool 2 years ago, right? That doesn't mean anything to me. It really doesn't, right? What matters to me is, are you winning games? And Manchester United is not winning games. And Everton is only not winning games slightly yet less than Manchester United. So the fact that we have plus 550 here is insanity. That is insanity. Oh, Ruben Amorim. Okay, let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's wait. But right now, this is a lot of value. Whew. All right, Tottenham, Fulham. I don't see a ton of value here. That's why I kind of like left it at like 100. Um, you know, I don't see an insane value, but like again, Tottenham six, Fulham is 9. Yeah, I guess I do see a lot of insane value here. This is insane. That's why I put 100 down. Um, there's a 1 point difference between these two teams, and Vegas is treating it like let's see. So even let's take Nottingham Ipswich at face value. Let's pretend that this line makes sense, which it doesn't, right? Okay, let's take this at face value, right? Minus 145, 410, right? Nottingham Ipswich. Nottingham Forest is seventh, Ipswich is 18th. There is a 10 point difference between the two. We're getting the same odds as Tottenham and Fulham. Like that's ridiculous. Like I know that Nottingham Forest is a very soft and like, but like come on. Like what are we doing here, guys? So I'm gonna move this around a little bit. I'm gonna change this to 80 and I'm going to put 120 because talking about this has made me like think that yeah. Okay. And then finally, Liverpool versus Man City. I don't think that these big games really I think you get a lot more value of betting on like, Wolves Bournemouth than you do Liverpool Man City because you really just have a lot of professionals, a lot of analysis. You know, everything that I can say, someone has probably already said, right? So I don't really like to like bet a lot of money on these. I even when I was gambling, I never bet on the Super Bowl. I think it's stupid. That being said, like, you know, I put 50 on Liverpool because I'm a Liverpool fan. I think that Manchester City is a lot worse right now than they actually are on the record. I think Liverpool is a lot better than they are on the record. But if I wasn't a Liverpool fan, I'd probably put 50 on Man City. I think anytime you're getting like, plus 200 on Manchester City is kind of like you should take that. But for me, I'm a Liverpool fan. I don't want to bet against Liverpool here. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm taking Liverpool. But if you were to bet these lines following me, personally, I'd bet $50 on Manchester City or like 5 units on Manchester City instead of Liverpool. But this is what I'm running with. If it ends up Liverpool wins, like I'm not gonna apologize, like, because fuck you. But yeah, this is my bets for the week. I'm making these videos because, I want, one thing that a lot of like pick people do is they'll just like have like 10 different accounts and they'll do different picks. And then after like 10 weeks, like one of the accounts is incredible. So they'll be like, oh, look at my results, one account, one spreadsheet. All of this spreadsheet is in the comments. You can look at this. I'm updating this week to week. I'm pretty sure you can look at edit history so you can see when I edited what. You can see what the different versions are. You have this video. I'm not going to change anything after this video. So, I'm trying to be the first honest person in betting, and you can like see what I'm able to do. So yeah, let's hope I'm right. Right? All right. Until next week, hopefully a next shows up.